There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Well, this is an auspicious occasion for me because I have been such a fan of Stella's book channel, and it's taken some finagling, but I have finally got her to be a VIP guest on Bite Size Book Chats. This is Stella from the fabulous booktube channel 30 Books, joining us from Melbourne, Australia. Hello, Stella.
Hello, Sean. What a lovely introduction. I was thinking, who's he talking about? Talking about me.
I'm talking about you. Stella's channel's been around for a couple of years, and she talks. She's going to tell us about her channel. In fact, I'm not even going to try to describe it, but it is a joy to watch. And Stella just has this natural charisma and presence that I think that she needs to become a TV person in her next iteration. Stella, tell us about your channel.
Thanks, Sean. You can become my manager if you like. So my channel is 30 Books. It's I started it to talk about Australian books, but I have since expanded a little bit more. And the idea is because in Australia, and I'm sure this is happening in other countries too, but particularly in Australia, our publishing industry and our writers are struggling. And I discovered actually a great deal of Australian writers weren't reading that much Australian literature, and also my reader friends as well. So I wanted to talk. So the idea is that if we all buy and borrow and talk about 30 Australian books a year each, our publishing industry and our writers will flourish.
What a lovely, brilliant concept. And that's why your channel is called 30 Books.
Yes. I have to admit, I don't even know if I read 30 books a year, because for someone who's a booktuber, compared to other booktubers that I watch, I think I actually don't read that much.
Well, you certainly proselytize on behalf of the publishing industry. You say that your channel has branched out. In what way has it moved beyond solely Australian books?
So I have started talking about other particular books, and I'm a bit of a Barbara Pym fan. So I know. I thought that would get your heartstrings, which is what attracted me to you as well. So I'm starting to talk about more interesting, not so much all the prize winners. And I thought I was also starting to miss, because I was reading predominantly Australian books, or all Australian books, I was really starting to miss other books from different countries. And I have also started incorporating more. I've been flexing my acting muscles a little bit more in some of my videos.
Well, you're a class act and a good actor, and you do author interviews quite a bit now.
I do author interviews, which is what I love. So I get to go to, I know quite a few writers, and I also introduce myself to quite a few writers. Look, the thing is with writers, and there's so many of them, they actually don't very often say no to an interview. So I have started, it's not a podcast, so I do take my camera with me and I go to authors' houses, or I meet them at writers' festivals. I am going to start now incorporating talking to booksellers and librarians, because I love libraries.
Well, everybody, that is a great introduction to Stella's channel. Go hurry on over there and subscribe. And we are here to talk about an Australian book, a work of, well, I'm not quite sure of the genre. I'll get Stella to try and pin that down. The book is called Grimmish by Michael Winkler. There is the cover, and it was published in 2021. I think it might have had an earlier edition as well. Tell us about this book, Stella.
Well, where do I start? You're right. It is non-fiction. It's called explosive creative non-fiction. It's called Grimmish. Now,
What?
on a very basic level, it is the story. So Joe Grimm is an historical figure, like a real person, in about the late 1800s, early 1900s. He was a boxer and he was a pain artist. So do you know much about boxing? Do you have any interest at all about boxing?
I don't, but I understand from reading other reviews that you don't really have to have the slightest interest in boxing to really get into this book. I'm aware of the one in Jack Johnson. I think I read a novel in which he was a character. That's about it.
He's a character in this, I think, if it's the same person. So he was Italian, and then when he was a child, he moved with his parents over to America and then did a tour in Australia. So it really is, it's the story of Joe Grimm. So that's at the basic level. On another level, it's a study in masculinity. So while this is fictionally true and his travels in Australia are true, I can guarantee there was no talking goat, but there is a talking goat in this book. So the story is really, it's got two narrators. We're assuming it's Michael Winkler because there's a bit of metafiction going on as well. So he's actually talking about writing the book while he's writing the book. So he goes to visit his old great uncle, who then tells the story about how he travelled with Joe Grimm. Now, there's a thing in boxing, you need a sparring partner. And Joe Grimm was a sparring partner, and he had the living daylights beaten out of him, and to the point where boxers, they just thought, I can't keep beating up this man. But Joe Grimm's thing was keep coming at me. He would not be put out. And that's the most I can say. But it's interesting. Can I read just a part of it? I think this will give an insight into the book. You make a reasonable point, I said to my uncle. Why write a book about pain when there are many sunny aspects of the human condition that could be written about instead? So many other grains of sand. Perhaps there are ghosts in my head, old horrors and insecurities that link to tropes of masculine behaviour and rural Australia, or versions of the same that existed a long time ago when I was growing up, and which I may have misread at the time, and my misapprehensions have metastasized since. There's some really ugly scenes in this book. It's not for the faint-hearted, but it's weirdly entertaining and insightful. There's a famous Australian book called Wake in Fright, which is also, it's from I think the late 1960s, early 1970s. That's also a study of Australian masculinity, and I think you could put this on a par with that one.
So I'd like to go back to the phrase you used near the beginning, which was that you described him as a pain artist. Is that Michael Winkler's term, or was that a word that Grimm himself used? What does it mean to be a pain artist?
Well, that's an interesting question, actually. I hadn't thought of that. The story is that when he was a child, in order to make money, he had an older brother who was disabled, and this was when they were in Italy and they were living in abject poverty. And so he went to the town square and head-butted the cathedral door in order to get money. And then there was a local strongman who used him. So this was going to be the big, event in the village, used him as a ramming.
Okay, well,
against the cathedral door. So that was the artiste. That's how he made his money.
I think pain artist makes perfect sense. Yeah.
He was a terrible boxer, terrible boxer, but he made his money and he's made his notoriety from losing boxing matches but not falling down. But there's a wisdom to the book, and Michael Winkler is a fine, fine writer. He couldn't find a publisher for this book. It is an experimental work.
Did you find yourself getting curious about the author? How much of a presence is in the story, in the book, is the author?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's non-fiction, because there's a part where he talks about writing the book and wasting his time. Was he wasting this time writing this experimental book? And he talks about his wife and his child, and he says, is this stupid? And his wife says, no, it's absurd, but not stupid. So I don't know if he put that in later on because he had a terribly hard time finding a publisher. In the end, he self-published. Mm. And this is the first self-published book that has ever been shortlisted for the Miles Franklin Award. So the Miles Franklin, are you familiar with the Miles Franklin Award here in Australia? Yeah.
I am. Stella, I could talk to you all day. Will you come back?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, great. Thanks so much.
Oh, Sean, you're such a generous and, I want to say kind, but apparently men don't like being called kind. Or that could be heterosexual men, I don't know. Or nice. They don't like being nice. You're such a generous and kind member of the BookTube community.
Well, right back at you. Subhasree from Singapore is back. Hello again, Subhasree.
Hey, hi, Sean. Thanks for having me back.
We're here to talk about a rather controversial British novel by a British novelist, playwright, filmmaker. My goodness, he wears so many hats of British and Pakistani background. Hanif Kureishi, and the novel is called Intimacy.
That's right.
And I understand there's many a reader who didn't feel so intimate with the book. You liked it in a 4-star way. Please tell us about this book.
Yeah, it seems to get pretty contrasting reviews from people. People either feel very good about it or they feel very bad about it. But whatever they feel, it seems that people feel very strongly about it.
That's right. There's no middle ground.
No middle ground here, it seems. What I felt about this book was it was pretty honest. The protagonist, Jay, is on the verge of leaving his partner, the mother of his 2 sons, in pursuit of some sort of an idealistic sexual love, which he even doesn't know whether it exists or not, but he feels that it's out there for him. And his current partner, Suzanne, is not being able to fulfill those demands for him. So as you can understand, this one, I think, was released in 1998, and it spurred a lot of controversy regarding this sort of theme where a man is trying to leave his partner just for the pursuit of sexual love. For me, it was a 4-star rate because I really liked the honesty of it. I liked the way that the character was pretty flawed because that only makes him human. You asked me also, why is it not a 5-star rate? Is the character is pretty flawed and he doesn't come across as a very nice man. So possibly at the end of the day, I would have liked him to be shown a bit more humane. He is human. That much was shown, but he is not very humane in the way he is speaking about his partner or in the way he's speaking about his mistress at the current moment also.
Is there some kind of a character arc where there's any evidence of him growing or changing in any way, or does he basically stay the same throughout the novel?
He more or less
spoilers.
He is more or less staying the same because it's a first-person narrative in the first place. Basically, the whole thing, even when he talks about the past, his relationship with his friends, when they discuss about their family life or portrayals of marriage and all, it's not like they are very, what shall I say, considerate to their partners most of the time. Even the friends who choose to stay in a marriage, they don't promote it, if I can say it properly. Marriage is a hard work, so it needs a lot of tender loving care, which I felt was lacking in the protagonist as well as his group of friends' point of view.
This helped you to understand that kind of man? Is that part of why you liked it?
Yeah, it's part of like that. I understood the male perspective, especially this sort of perspective, which people leave their wives for other things. I understand that this is a pretty natural instinct also, but I feel that fiction sometimes also can give you hope, which this
So
one doesn't.
was there hope in this book that he?
Not really.
Okay, yeah. So that's why it was a 4-star read.
Yes.
But you still did not regret investing the time in this. How long is it? It's 250 pages. It was still quite a rewarding experience to spend that much time with the protagonist.
It was for me, at least, Sean, because this one reads fast. His writing is very nice. It's very crisp. Maybe at times I felt it was harping on the same chord a bit too much, but still, then each of the short anecdotes were giving some insight into the protagonist or the other characters.
How would you describe the tone of this book? Was there any humor? Was it very serious?
It was pretty serious, at times a bit self-indulgent. It was more of a self-indulgent, pathetic sort of feeling that the man was drowning in his self-pity. He wanted to be, seemed that he wanted to be safe. So there was a place where he was basically, he hadn't told his wife. It mostly happens in the span of a night when he's considering how to tell his partner that he is going to leave her. There was a scene where the partner is sleeping and he just walks into the bedroom and sits on the bed, and he sort of wills her to turn around and say that don't leave me. It seemed like he is trying to hold on to something, some reason for not leave her. So
he's conflicted. He's conflicted,
and that's something
so that adds a nuance to it already, doesn't it?
Yes, that does, definitely.
So Hanif Kureishi is openly bisexual, and his movie, My Beautiful Laundrette, meant something to me as a young gay man. I saw it in the late 1980s. I don't remember anything about the movie, but it did mean something to me at the time. There is nothing about anything queer sexuality or bisexuality in this novel, right?
No, this is pretty much straightforward heterosexual.
Straightforwardly straight.
Yeah, it's straightforwardly straight.
So I would urge anyone who might be deeply put off by reading a book about somebody like this to look at the synopsis on Goodreads, because there are some quotes. I will just read one from the point of view of the protagonist. He says of his partner, "She thinks she's feminist, but she's just bad-tempered." So look at that list and see if you would be okay with spending all this time with a protagonist who comes up with these kind of pronouncements, but you thought it paid off by the end, and that it makes me very curious about this book. Subhasree, thank you for telling us about it.
Thank you so much, John.
Lynnie from Ipswich in the UK is back to talk about another book. Hello, Lynnie.
Hello, Sean, and thank you for inviting me back. It's a pleasure to be here again.
You are here to talk about a 1951 novel by a quite esteemed British writer, Stella Gibbons. It's called The Swiss Summer. I have my own copy on Red. Please convince me that I need to read this book as soon as possible.
Okay. I'll just show you, I've got my copy, so I love it, love that cover. Well, The Swiss Summer was written in 1951 by the author of Stella Gibbons, is the author of Cold Comfort Farm. But this is completely different to Cold Comfort Farm. And the main character is Lucy Cottrell, who's in her 40s and she's married. And the novel starts in post-war London, and she's staying with a friend who introduces her to Lady Dalglish. She's a widow in her 80s, and she was married. Her husband was a mountaineer, and so they have a chalet in the Swiss Alps. Lovely. Mrs. Blandish, who is her secretary companion, is going to the chalet for the summer to do an inventory of all the books and items at the chalet. And on a whim, Lady Dalglish invites Lucy to go with her. You know, she invites a couple of friends as well, because she'd like her to write to her and give her entertaining news. Lucy jumps at this chance because she went on honeymoon in the Swiss Alps and would love to return.
I also wanted to clarify, just to make sure that it's clear, this is her name Lady Dalgleish?
It's Lady Dalgleish.
Dalgleish?
I thought it would be Dalgleish. It's Dalgleish.
She invites the protagonist. The protagonist's name is Lucy.
Lucy.
To go with
her secretary,
Frida,
companion.
But the Lady Dalgleish is not going to be there, right? Or
She's
is
not
she
going to be there. She's not going to be there. She's in her 80s now and she can't travel out there. Lucy jumps at the chance to go because she had honeymooned in the Swiss Alps and was very eager to return. So within 3 weeks, it's sorted out with her husband that she's going, and she's going to travel by train across France. Stella Gibbons wrote a very good line saying, Mrs. Blandish, of course, flew. And I think by that, you know that the two women have also, there are already slight differences between them. The journey across France is very well described. I was just fascinated by it. Lucy really enjoys it, but at the same time, Stella Gibbons pokes fun at the British abroad, their sort of rudeness, expectations, their manners, to a point where Lucy thinks, I am actually ashamed to be English. At that time, probably the nouveau riche were being able to, middle class were being able to go abroad after the war than they were before the war. So and Lucy arrives at the chalet and she loves it. She falls in love with it. I mean, the meadows, the alpine meadows, the mountains, the clear, bright air. And she thinks, she's going to have an idyllic summer. And then Mrs. Blandish's daughter turns up unexpectedly.
Oh.
And so Lucy's a bit surprised by that. And then a few days later, Mrs. Blandish's paying guests arrive. And this is all unknown to Lady Dalgleish in London.
Oh.
And Mrs. Blandish asks Lucy not to tell her.
Oh, so there's some secrets that need to be kept.
Secrets to be kept. So therefore, Lucy is in an awkward spot.
In your review, which I will link in the show notes, you said this book made you laugh and cry. So there's some things that were quite moving.
Yeah, I thought it was funny the way Mrs. Blandish and her friends were portrayed. They go on a trip across the lake. Lucy is drinking it all in, the scenery, the castles. Mrs. Blandish and her friend just gossip about television and cigarettes and stockings and clothing. And, I can imagine them, the whole journey. They're just, they're in this beautiful, beautiful Swiss Alps all around them. And they're just facing each other, and it just made me laugh.
Also parts of the story that moved you.
Moved me was towards the end, so I can't say.
Probably don't want to say,
much.
But it does have a.
Yeah, but also, a bit I can say is that obviously holidays come to an end. The weather starts to change. The cows come down from the meadows; they're herded back down. Summer is turning into autumn, and the Swiss who are there will be left, to get on with their winters. And I can tell you the last bit, which isn't a spoiler, because obviously Lucy does come home and she just compares cold, grey London and thinks just a few hours away, there's this clear, bright air that is, and it just sort of, got me a bit, really.
Well, maybe the next time we do a bite-sized chat, Lynnie, I'll be talking to you on Zoom from your new Swiss chalet next summer.
That would be good.
Thanks so much, Lynnie. Ryan from San Jose is back. Hello, Ryan.
Hi, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Well, you were waxing passionate on Instagram the other day about a new queer debut novel, and I nabbed you got you to come on here and tell us about it. And it's called The Town of Babylon by Alejandro Varela. Came out in March this year, and I want you to talk about that cover. Don't let me forget, because that's quite a cover image. In fact, if you want to start with the cover, you can, but otherwise, please tell us about this book.
I love this cover so much. I think it's one of the best I've seen this year for sure. I just love the orange roofs and like the person flying above them and the pink color. I think it's fantastic.
Well, that's very interesting because I didn't look at it very closely, and I have always assumed it was theater seats, and this guy was sprawled on top of them, whether he'd fallen from a height or he'd passed out drunk. But now that I look at it more closely, but it is a great cover.
Yeah, I love it. So, like you said, The Town of Babylon is a book that came out in March of this year. It's a debut novel from Alejandro Varela. I actually got a chance to see him in San Francisco right after this came out. And he said that his passion is really writing short stories. And that's where he started. And he had a collection of short stories he was trying to sell. But those are really hard to get a lot of traction in the publishing world. So they're like, can you take some of this and make it into a novel? And he's like, okay, I'll try. He said he wrote this in like 4 weeks, I think he said. And I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I loved it as soon as it came out. And then it was just nominated for the National Book Award in the United States. The main character, Andres, is from a small town in New York State. He returns to his town after his dad has surgery to help take care of him and his mother. His family has some stuff going on. There's some stuff that happened with his brother in the past. And he's kind of in a rocky place in his relationship. He's in a relationship with a man named Marco, who didn't go with him on this trip. Andres is by himself. And while he's in his hometown, he realizes his high school reunion is taking place. He's about in his early 40s. He's in the class of 1997. He decides to go to this reunion and he sees his high school bully. And things may not be what he remembers about his high school bully. And he reconnects with him on a different level.
Well, that was tantalizingly just this side of a spoiler, and it was not a spoiler, but now, damn it, I want to start reading it tonight. You loved this novel, so I'm going to guess I know the answer to my next question, which is it didn't feel like a short story that had been stretched into a novel. It actually felt like a fully satisfying novel.
Totally. I don't think this was a short story that was turned into one. And it didn't feel like that. It felt like its own story. And I thought it was just really riveting the whole way through. I had a personal connection just because I grew up in a small town and
Me too.
I graduated from high school in 1996. So we would be about the same age. And so like there was a lot I could relate to. Of course, the main character is Latino. He lives in this town or suburb of New York City. It's never named, but it's this town that almost has been abandoned. There's a lot of white people who have left and a lot of immigrants have moved in. And so I think that's what the title refers to, is that there's this diverse community where people speak different languages, like the Tower of Babel kind of thing, and they're all coming together.
And so now I'm thinking about the image now that you've explained to me what the cover image is. So it's like he's kind of parachuting in or landing on his town, and perhaps a rather chaotic experience ensues.
Yeah. A fish out of water, but like, familiar with all the places, but it's totally different. He's totally different from when he grew up. He examines a lot of different issues in this community in really interesting ways, like dealing with mental health, dealing with illness, race, ethnicity, sexuality. And he did a really good job just bringing those things together in a really compelling story. In some ways, this is unlike a book I've ever read. And when I saw Alejandro in San Francisco, he really approached this from a public health perspective. Like that's his work. That's where he's received his degrees. He's not a writer by profession. He didn't go to like writers' workshops or anything. Like, he works in public health, and so he wanted to tell this story through a public health perspective. And
that is fascinating.
Yeah, it brings a different perspective to the novel that you don't often get.
Can you give a concrete example of something in the book that would be an example of this? I'm quite fascinated by this.
Well, a lot of it is about this town where there are immigrants, there are people of color, white people have left, and so there's not opportunities. And so he really looks at how this has affected like the health of his father, the mental health of his friend. Those types of ideas, I think, really come through.
Well, I'm sold, and I think I might have to start reading it tonight, damn you. I've got 17 other books I'm reading. So thanks for coming on Bite Size Book Chats and telling us about it.
Thank you. I hope you get to it soon and enjoy it as much as I did.